Well, Malaysia will be imposing a new sales and services tax from the 1st of September. That's coming in as Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad looks to repeal an unpopular goods and services tax introduced under the former government. Goods will now be subject to a sales tax of between 5 to 10%, while the tax on services will remain at the current rate of 6%. Although the percentage charged on some goods is higher than under the old system, more than 5,400 items will be exempt. They include staples such as food products, rice and cooking oil, medication, newspapers and construction materials. That's 10 times the number of items exempt under the goods and services tax, which was introduced 3 years ago. Finance Minister Lim Guang Eng has said the government is expected to raise just over $5 billion from the new taxes next year, which is less than half the amount raised from the GST in 2017. He says the shortfall of around $5.6 billion will be covered by higher income from its state oil and gas firm Petronas, as well as its sovereign wealth fund, Khazanah Nasional. Well, for more on this story, let's go to Alex Holmes from Capital Economics in London. He's an emerging markets economist specialising in Asia. Welcome to the program. Well, we finally have the details of this long-awaited sales and services tax, but how does it compare to the previous GST?
So the first thing to note is that it's far narrower in scope than GST. So GST was levelled on the retailer, the wholesaler and the manufacturer, but SST is only levelled on manufacturers. So it's got a far narrower scope than GST.
And that presumably means a huge shortfall of funds as well. We mentioned there that in the first year, at least, is expected to lose essentially $5 billion worth of tax revenue. This is revenue that the Malaysian government badly needs because it's in so much debt. Isn't that right?
That's correct, yes. So the deficit currently stands, the fiscal deficit currently stands at 3% of GDP in 2017. It was projected to fall to 2.8% under the previous government, but since the scrapping of GST and its replacement with a far narrower tax, it looks likely to blow out to around 3.5% of GDP. And given the recent revelations that the national debt may be as high as 1 trillion ringgit, which is about 75% of GDP, it's desperately needed source of revenue if they want to try and reduce their debt burden.
Yes, and as I mentioned earlier, the Minister said that it would make up this shortfall from higher income from Khazanah Nasional, the sovereign wealth fund, as well as Petronas, the state oil and gas company. But can those higher revenues make up for some $5 billion worth of less tax?
Well, personally, I'm sceptical because, as you know, oil revenues are very volatile. So while oil prices may be hovering around the high 70s at the moment, they may fall again to the 50s or even the 40s in a couple of years' time. So it's not a permanent solution. So the government was projecting that oil prices would only be $52 a barrel in their last budget. So there's obviously going to have a bit of a surplus from high oil prices, but that may not last.
We're obviously just seeing the beginning of Mahathir Mohamad's term, I guess, most recent term in office. I'm wondering, do they have any other plans to make up for the shortfall of revenue?
Well, one of the things that the Finance Minister has said is recovering some of the money lost in the 1MBD scandal under the previous government. It's estimated by the US Treasury Department that almost $4.5 billion was embezzled through this fund. But considering that the national debt is potentially 1 trillion ringgit, then it's not really going to make a massive dent, and it's going to be very hard to recover that money.
And we've also heard recent announcements from Prime Minister Mahathir that he's looking to cancel or at least suspend some very big Chinese-backed projects. These projects were introduced under his predecessor, Najib Razak. Do you think that was a smart move, given Malaysia's precarious debt situation?
Well, scrapping the projects may help their debt situation, but there's also going to be a hit to growth as well, because both during the construction phase and potentially, if you scrap up projects that have already been agreed, that puts off new investors as well. So it may have a short-term hit to growth, but a lot of these projects may have had questionable economic foundations. Malaysia already has a very good infrastructure for a country of its income level, and there are several examples across the emerging world of Chinese-backed projects that have turned out to be large white elephants and thrown the economies of the host countries into financial troubles.
So what is then the outlook for the Malaysian economy? Are you optimistic?
We expect it to gradually slow over the next few years. So there will be a fiscal boost from the scrapping of GST as consumers have more greater spending power, but there will also be a few headwinds to the economy. There, as mentioned, is going to be the scrapping of some large-scale infrastructure projects that would have injected a lot of money into the economy. And then there's also the worsening external environment. So there's just the fact that exports grew at a really fast pace last year, and that's not really going to be matched this year or next. And also there's growing risks of spillovers from the US-China trade war. Malaysia makes a lot of the intermediate goods that go to China that are then sent on to the US. So any drop in Chinese exports to the US is going to hurt the Malaysian economy.
Okay, Alex Holmes in London. We will have to leave it there, but thank you again for your time.